The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, we just heard the most extraordinary Conservative diatribe from the Leader of the Opposition, who says that any reference by me to the flag is a distraction, and then distracts the parliament himself by moving a matter of public importance, accuses me of manipulating the flag, and then decks every desk in Parliament House with the flag, manipulates it for all it's worth. I mean, that's the sort of humbug that we see. That's the sort of humbug which we see.
The Leader of the Opposition.
That's the sort of humbug which we see from the Leader of the Opposition. Someone who is quite prepared always to manipulate situations and to do as it suits him. The fact is, Mr Speaker, of the 50 members of the Commonwealth, only 4 countries still have the Union Jack as part of the design of their flag. Only 4. Only 4. Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and Tuvalu. And here we are on the weekend, the Leader of the Opposition presenting a flag, an Australian flag, to the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, a member of the Commonwealth, who has the Queen as the head of state and has a flag which is symbolic entirely of Papua New Guinea. What must he thought of you with a gesture like that? He must have thought you were a fool. He must have thought you were a fool. Now, Mr Speaker, in Canada, a similar debate ensued, and of course they adopted a flag which now entirely and unambiguously represents that country. But today, any such debate here is characterised as preparing to tear down an Australian symbol, preparing to rip away at something. He says a distortion, a misrepresentation. He said, one question he asks is, why is the Prime Minister pushing this issue at this time? Answer, because to make our way in the world, and particularly this part of the world, we have to be entirely certain of who we are and what we wish to do. No, you're not certain. You want to keep your links with Europe. You want to keep these sort of old links with Europe. You talk about Indonesia, yet in your day you oppose their independence. You have never been part of the region. You've never taken an interest in it. And then the Leader of the Opposition had to say.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will withdraw.
The Leader of the Opposition had to say that of Asians, he said, they don't think of us as a colony. He said he said that they're not confused. They're not confused. The fact is, most Asian countries are very confused about Australia. They're not sure whether we want to trade with them. They're not sure whether we want to trade with them. They're not sure whether we want to be part of the area. They're not sure whether it is simply tokenism. They're certainly unsure of us when we turn up all the time with the Union Jack in the corner of our flag, entirely uncertain of us. And in answer, Mr Speaker, to that reference in the transcript, which I read in the House at question time, to a questioner in Indonesia, it was met with a round of applause, because they are entirely confused. They are confused about the motives of Australia and Australians. And then we had this talk about I was trying to distort our history. I was simply making a point about Kokoda and Milne Bay and Papua New Guinea, that this was the one campaign where Australia's interests were defended against an invasion of Australia's landmass. A simple point, I should have thought. The place was under threat of an attack from the forces of Japan, and they were rejected and thrown off Papua New Guinea by Australian forces. Australia was not threatened in the First World War. There was no invasion force coming here then. That's not to say, as the Leader of the Opposition implied, that there was any less value to the sacrifice in those campaigns. Of course there wasn't. But the fact of the matter is, I simply made that point. But Mr Speaker, the real issue is that the Leader of the Opposition, he's up here with trying to be more blue blood than the blue bloods, like the member for Bennelong. Never born in the purple, sort of waving the flag more vigorously than most, and flaunting more flamboyantly their sort of British connections. trying to suggest, Mr. Speaker, that in some way they understand the Australian psyche and the Australian culture better. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, it is an entirely healthy thing to debate. That is whether or not the Australian flag does ambiguously or unambiguously represent Australia, an image of Australia. And I've given you my view. My view is that it does, and that it's something the government think about. Mr. Speaker, while many of our institutions, our traditions and even our attitudes are British, we are not. We are not. While we share much of our history with Britain, our history is our own.
Cease interjecting.
And our present and our future is most certainly our own. And what I said in Indonesia was an assertion of Australian identity, an assertion of our determination to meet the challenges which face us. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's pretty obvious, is it not, from the reference I read today, that when the first flag was designed and that competition set up, it said that the references had to be to the imperial references and to Britain. And that is why. But the thing is, look, it's a self-evident truth. The flag bears a representation of the British flag in the corner. Is that true or not? That is true, exactly. And how? And if that is true, it's a simple fact. If that is true, how can it be other than an ambiguous representation of Australia? How can it other? Mr.
If
Speaker,
the member Ben Long continues to interject, I'll name
how can it be other than an ambiguous representation of Australia? As you said, Mr. Speaker, when the new flag was organised, it should be based on the British ensigns as flags of the countries added to its fold. Well, in other words, no. I'm proud of Australia. It's not Britain. We are not British. We are Australians. That's the point. You don't understand. You don't understand that this is the Australian nation. This is not the British nation. This is not the British. You can't ever grasp it. You couldn't grasp it in the Second World War. You had Menzies, your founder, over there, trying to separate and distinguish Britain's interests from Australia's, and in the end couldn't. And Curtin had to stand up and say, free of any pangs of loyalty to Britain, brought the troops home. This your founder called a blunder. A blunder that we should have brought our troops back from the Middle East to defend our continent, Australia, from an invasion of Japan. Not selective history, correct history, accurate history. And the Liberal Party has always been a lickspittle to these interests. Always been confused, never proud to be Australian. And we look at these people, Menzies and Bruce, always confusing the interests of Australia, than from other countries. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition accuses me of going to another country to manipulate issues and talk about the flag. In the Sun Herald last Sunday, it said Dr Hewson attacked Keating and PNG. Dr Hewson said the weekend of ceremonies beginning today was not a time for playing politics, and then proceeded to do just that. The
Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting.
It says the Federal Opposition Leader, this is the age. Dr Hewson yesterday used the Kokoda Trail anniversary celebration in Papua New Guinea to make another dig at the Prime Minister, Mr Keating, over the flag. In other words, you're entirely a humbug. You get up in the House and you try and, with feigned indignation, make puny points in a speech you could barely maintain for 15 minutes about how outside of Australia that's right, turn your back, how outside of Australia I've misrepresented interests when there's two newspapers in Australia, credit you with going out there blackguarding the place. And then, of course, in New Zealand, as I quoted in the House, Mr Speaker, we had the Leader of the Opposition saying bad values. We have to jettison 20 years of bad values. This is about Australians in another country, 20 years of bad values by just about everybody. And then earlier he had to say, we have fallen off the pace dramatically in terms of our region, the Asia-Pacific region, not to mention other parts of the world, to the point where it has now affected our international standing as a nation. I don't think our international standing as a nation is affected, and I certainly would never concede that point, disloyally in another country, as you have. Now, Mr. Speaker,
I warn the Leader of the Opposition.
This is the kind of humbug you expect from the Leader of the Opposition. The kind of humbug you expect from the Leader of the Opposition. He says a discussion about the flag is a distraction, yet he elevates it to a matter of public importance. He says, I'm manipulating the flag, and then he decks all the desks of the opposition seats with a copy of the flag. He says that I had a temerity to answer a question in Indonesia about the flag and raising an issue like this abroad, and then he raises it abroad by presenting a flag to the Papua New Guinea Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, is credited so by 2 newspapers, while at the same time having recently blackguarded his own nation while in New Zealand. I asked the public, Mr. Speaker, to make a judgment on the veracity of the claims and the integrity with which this proposition has been moved by the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the fact is, the real distraction is the distraction away from sugar. That's the real distraction. That's the real distraction. The issue of substance. The real distraction. The real distraction, Mr. Speaker, is a distraction away from the 15% consumption tax, which I can assure you we won't be distracted with. But, Mr. Speaker, we had a little touch of that elitism from the Leader of the Opposition.
The member for Mayo.
That in the course of his remarks, when he talked...
I move the member for Mayo be suspended from the service of this House.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Those that oppose... I'll hear the member for Hume.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's been a lot of interjection from both sides of the House. I was in fact sitting alongside of the member for Mayo, and I think he's been harshly treated, and I ask that you give him an opportunity to apologise.
I've heard the Leader of Opposition business. I might say that the member for Mayo was previously warned and continued to defy the chair, as did his colleagues.
If I may say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was me who was interjecting and not the member for Mayo.
The member for Mayo continued to interject.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I helped the House on that occasion, I have, Mr. Speaker, I'm quite happy to apologise to the House if the interjection in any way created any disruptions.
All right. The Honourable Prime Minister will proceed.
I'll confirm these points. The Leader of the Opposition the elitists made much of my limited education. He focused upon my limited education. And he said, with my limited education, how could I know about these things? I mean the gall of this sort of poor elitism, the gall of it. My limited education.
The member for Keating.
I've got the job he wants, but my limited education. My limited education.
The member for Gilmore.
Mr. Speaker, and then the point about the fact that I was an illegitimate Prime Minister, ignoring the fact that Prime Ministers Fraser, McMahon, Gorton, McEwen, Holt and Shifley had been appointed by their parties to the leadership of their parties. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the majority of Australian Prime Ministers have been appointed, not elected at a poll. Jack Lang had the weights of all of you people, the weights of all of you. He knew what you were. He knew what you were. Snivellers to forces abroad. Crawlers to forces abroad. Lick-spittlers to forces abroad. And you've never changed. You don't understand Australia. You don't understand Australian nationalism. The Labor Party's had to drag you screaming to every national event. We had to drag you out of the mess in World War II and prosecute it successfully for you. And we had to finally remodel the Australian economy after the mess you made in the post-war years. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party never meets the challenge. Never meets the challenge. It'll be dragged screaming on this. And at one stage, Mr. Speaker, when Australia has a flag of its own, unambiguously Australian, people will look back on those debates and they'll turn up the Hansard and they'll giggle at the member for Bennelong's remarks and the Leader of the Opposition's remarks, just as today you can giggle at the ones in 1943 for the fact that they don't comprehend the notion of nationhood. They don't advance our nationhood. You've never understood it. You've always thought it was subordinate and derivative. It's not, and it never will be while ever the flag of Labor flies in this country.